to launch When I Was Clandestine.
Thank you very much, and can I also acknowledge that the land that we meet on tonight is the land of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to past elders and present. Can I acknowledge Juan, who's here, who's a very good friend of mine and a neighbour of mine as well. The publishers, Mark and Linda, to everyone else that's here, can I just say what a great pleasure it is to be here to assist in the launching of this wonderful book of When I Was Clandestine. And this came about on election day. I was at the Cowndilla booth, which is one of the best supportive booths that I have in the entire electorate. And I always go down there. It was the school I went to. I live around the corner, and I saw Juan there, and he asked if I could launch his book. I said, it's my birthday, it's on the 13th. But for Juan, I was more than happy to do it. The people I'm having dinner with tonight can wait, and no problem. It's very important, and it is important. It is so important when we launch books like this, poetry that are not just from the heart, but poetry that's come from something that you've lived, something that you've gone through, the emotions that it brings, the things that it does to a human being throughout our lives, the things that we experience. And I knew, without even having a look at this book or these poems, what these poems were about when Juan asked me to launch it. And you know, when I went through the poetry and the poems in here and looked at the words and the meaning and the feelings it brought out in me, I understood immediately that that day at that polling booth, I knew exactly what I was going to launch without even having looked at this book. Because I know what not one has been through, but many people in this world who struggled every single day, not to change the world, not to bring about democracy, but for a plate of food, so they don't starve to death. That is a struggle in itself. Struggling is a bit like a spectrum. There's one end to the other end. And if we start at the very bottom end, we know what it's like. And it's fine to say to people, let's help these people and let's feed them, and everyone applauds and claps. But the moment you say, let's change the system so they can feed themselves, you'll be labelled with a million different labels. And we've seen this throughout history, whether it be in Chile, in South America, whether it be in places like Nicaragua, whether it be in places like Syria today, where we, right now, right this moment, we can see how people are labelled, ostracised, jailed, imprisoned, and are made to suffer for their views and their thoughts. And I knew that all this would be encompassed in this book without having seen a single poem. When I look at this poetry, the one that struck me, there's a couple that I've marked out, but one that really, really struck me when I was reading them was one where it spoke about another man dies at the Nauru and Manus Island detention centres. And I'm not going to read it, but there are some parts in here where, for me, that poem, that poetry, the words that Juan put together was basically, here we are, walking in the street, someone dies in Nauru, people are incarcerated, and we go about our lives. When I say we, I don't mean we in this room, but we as a collective in Australia, and just shrug our shoulders and put it out of sight, out of mind, and basically we've become a society made in the image, which is so scary and so true, of Pauline Hanson and John Howard. And that is something that myself as a politician, feel ashamed to even say that I am in politics when you read those words of where we've come from and the great movement that we've had in Australia in terms of encompassing everyone, encouraging everyone to be part of this wonderful multicultural society, and then at one point in history we changed it all. We all went backwards. And everyone's to blame, including myself, including my comrades in Parliament, including the media. And when you read this poem, it brings it home. We are a society made in the image of Pauline Hanson and John Howard. And that disturbed me when I read that. It really brought it home. And I suppose when we look at the poetry that's been written, you know that you have a man, an author, who went through so much, and we met, as I said, we're in the same neighbourhood. I grew up in Mile End. It was in the western suburbs where migrants first made their homes in their 50s, 60s and 70s. They're all moving out now, of course. They're upgrading and going down to Fulham Gardens and West Lakes. But I've decided to stay there because I love the area, and I know Juan's been there for many, many years, and we have connections in the area. And you look at the struggles of those people as well, who have, for whatever reason, decided to make their homes in our neighbourhood. Whether it be political asylum from other countries, refugees, economic migrants like my parents who left World War II or Civil War, absolute economy that was completely dissembled and there was no economy. And we have a community in that area, a community of people that, whether it be through politics, whether it be through activism, whether it be just through the community and social clubs, this poetry connects everyone. It connects all of us to the struggle that's required to make sure that we have a decent democracy, equality for all, and to be respected as human beings regardless of your background, where you've come from, how you got here, and what your social, I suppose, structure is in life. And when I read these poems that Juan wrote, the connection of poetry and politics, and I was thinking, I suppose poetry is a peaceful weapon that we can all use for the struggle of democracy. It's a peaceful weapon that we use to get people, and this is why people are incarcerated for their writings, for their songs, for their theatre, because they know it's a weapon, and it's a peaceful weapon that we can all use for the betterment of democracy and a better world. And my own experience, I was politicised when I was in Greece I first went to Greece in 1974, 72, then went back in 75. It was a year after the dictatorship. It was really interesting that once the junta fell in Greece, there was a connection between certain allied countries that sent their ambassador to Chile straight after in 1974, the same ambassador. But it was really interesting where I heard the stories of people that were imprisoned, people that were beaten, people that suffered. I would get into a taxi to travel somewhere and they'd say, oh, this is the place where they tortured people here, right here on the right. And on the left was a place, there was a little island just off the southern coast of Athens where people were incarcerated because of their political views. And reading these wonderful poems that aspire and are a weapon for the struggle of delivering decent democracy, I just couldn't resist connecting that to my own politicisation, I suppose, of the late 70s to where I am today. And to know that people, for their production of art, for the production of theatre, for the poetry, their songs, are basically locked up and told that no one is allowed to listen to your art because, as I said earlier, it is a peaceful weapon for the struggle of democracy. And it just brings me back to, I was thinking of some of the Greek poets. I'm sorry for connecting it to my own heritage, but I just couldn't resist it when I was reading these. They were so similar to Yanis Ritsos, who was someone that was basically imprisoned in the just after World War II, and they made his poetry and his books. The Epitaph, it was called. They actually had a ceremony where they burnt his books at the bottom of the Acropolis to show the world to show the people that this is illegal and we do not believe in these things. And then he was incarcerated again during the junta of the late 60s and early 70s, and imprisoned, and again his works were banned. So there's a lot of connection there. Different sides of the world. I was born in Australia, my parents came from Greece. Juan's birth was in Chile, that went through absolute turmoil through the Pinochet years. You know, these poems, as I said, are a tool, a weapon, a peaceful weapon for democracy. So I'd like to congratulate Juan for his wonderful poetry. I could basically read lots of them here, that all of them touched me. And I know that Juan has been someone who has struggled for the cause for many years, not just struggled for the cause, but has suffered for the cause as well. And we take it for granted here. We get active in political parties, we demonstrate, we do a whole range of things. But in some countries, even today, or not even today, today as we speak, people are suffering for their beliefs. They're suffering for what they believe in, they're suffering because they want a better world, and they're suffering because they actually produce that better world or their views in writings such as this. And even today, I know that some of the proceeds here today are going towards the Manchupa people who have been imprisoned because all they want is a little bit of their land back. They've got 5% currently of what they controlled a few years ago, and just for that small struggle where they had demonstrations in Santiago, have been imprisoned. I think it was about 2,000 people that were imprisoned, and there's still many of them in prison today. And this poetry certainly ensures that we put our feelings, our views into the peaceful weapon for democracy and equality. So I'd like to congratulate Juan, the publishers, who are wonderful to be able to publish. We need independent publishers that can publish things that perhaps other publishers turn a blind eye to or are not interested, because they too may know that it's a weapon, a peaceful weapon for democracy. So thank you, Juan, for your peaceful weapon towards democracy, and I look forward to seeing many more of your writings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.